Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Bava Basra Kufayim Vav Bava Basra 176. Today's Daf Yomi is dedicated to a Shemir of the Chayalim. It's all for the Shvuyim and Yeshua for Am Yisrael. And today we are going to be Messiah Mesechus Bava Basra and begin Sanhedrin. And we dive in that when we do a Simar of Sanhedrin, we're doing it with those who have been held captive of the Jewish people that they'll be released. So the Gemara says on 176a, Kufayim Vav Amud Aleph, 5 lines from the top. And it said in our Mishnah, let's say a person brings out a document that he had signed, that the borrower had signed to the lender, saying, I owe you $100. There are no witnesses. But it's just a note from the borrower to the lender. Then go So it's enough, we believe it, that he could collect from the free and clear property, but he can't collect from liened property, only from the Chasim B'nei Choron. So by Minei Rabbi Bar Barnas and Rabbi Yochanan, Huchsa Ksav Yadav Bezdin. Let's say, the question is, let's say later on, the lender took this signature, took this document to the court, and the court verified that it was the borrower's handwriting. At that point, can we now use it from anything subsequently sold by the borrower and say that that you could use it to collect from property that there's a lien on, the Chasim B'nei Shibud, from the Chasim Shubadim, not just from the Chasim B'nei Choron. So that's what Rabbi Yochanan was asked. So Amarway, he says, Afal Pishu Ksav Yadav Bezdin, even though the Ksav Yad was established in the court, you still can only collect from the free and clear property, but not from Mishubadim. Gemara questions this. So Rami Bar Chama challenges this idea from a Mishnah, Mesechas Gittin, which said that there were Shlosha Gittim Sulin, that there are 3 Gittin that are not okay, but if the offspring got married, if the woman remarried, then the offspring will be kosher. Means say they're not okay, but the ever they're okay. And these are the ones, Kasav the Ksav Yado, then let's say there was a get that the husband wrote, but there was without witnesses. Or Yeshu of Adim, let's say there were witnesses, but there was no date. There's a date, but there's only one witness. The Gemara in Gittin discussed all these cases, but we see in all these cases, these are all disqualified. But if she got married, the offspring is kosher. Gemara in Gittin also discusses why does it have to say that phrase twice. But the relevance to us comes to the next phrase where Rebbe Lazar says, Alpha Pisha Ein Olav Edim El Shenasnol of Edim Kasher. And Belazar says, even though there are no witnesses, if it was given in front of witnesses, it's kosher. And not only that, if it was no witnesses on it, but it was handed in front of witnesses, then you can now use that document to collect it from the property where there's a lien on it. So we see from here, as long as it's given over in front of a property of witnesses later on, collect from a lien property. So too, this document was certified by the court. It's even better than 2 witnesses. It's a whole bezdin. So you should be able to collect from the Chatzim Mishubadim. The Gemara says, no, there's a distinction. Chani Hasan, the Rishas Ksivu Deshiba Nafshay. Now that was a different type of document because there we're following the Shita of Rebbe Lazar. It says that the witnesses to the handing over of the document is what's essential. So when the person wrote that document, the assumption is he wrote it recognizing that there'd be a lien on his property. Where here, the document was written with a different intent. Question is, how do you know what the intent of the person who wrote that loan document was? Anyway, that's something that the Achronim discuss. So the Gemara now just says, in the next case, it said in our Mishnah that there was a guarantor that was signed, but after the signatures, then Rabbi Shmuel says the guarantor is responsible, but only from the free and clear property, because the witnesses were not signing to the guarantor. So Amar Rav, Kodem Chisim Ashtaros, Gova Minachasim Mishabadim. Rav says if he signed prior to the signatures, then he can collect from Nechasim Mishubadim. But if he signed subsequent to the signatures, but if he signed subsequent to the signatures, Gova Minachasim Minechorin, then he can only collect from the free and clear property. But Zimnin Amarav, but sometimes Rav said, not like this. Sometimes Rav said, I feel Kodem Chisim Shtaros, Eino Gova El Minachasim Minechorin. Sometimes Rav says, even if he signed prior to the signatures, he only collects from the Chasim Minechorin. So kosher the Rav. Isn't this a contradiction within Rav? That one source Rav says that that if he signed prior to the signatures, he collects from the Chasim Mishubadim. And the other source, he says, even if it was prior to the signatures, he can only collect from the free and clear property. So how do we explain this contradiction? So Gemara says, "Lo kasha, hadi kasabe poni arev, hadi kasabe uponi arev." So it depends about. There's written a vav before the guarantor that this person is the guarantor, or and this person is the guarantor. So if he says and this person is the guarantor, if it's before the signatures and there's a lien on the guarantor's property because it's clearly part of the same document and the witnesses are attesting to it. But if it doesn't say and, then it's not clear that the witnesses are part of that to the guarantor, and so therefore it's only from the free and clear property. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Echad Zeh Echad Zeh, you know, go vel minachas b'nechorin. Even if there's a vav, you only collect from the free and clear property. V'afagav the kasabei uponi arev. Even though he wrote, and this person is the guarantor, so Masav Rava. Rava challenges Rabbi Yochanan from the Tosefta. It says, Eidim achasumin al she'ela shalom beget. Pasul. So Rava says, how can you say this idea that even if it says a vav, prior to it, you only collect from the Chasim B'nei Choron? Good morning, Hobbs. We're on the bottom of 176a, around 15 lines from the bottom. So the Gemara says, how can Rabbi Yochanan say, even if there's a vav before the guarantor, so it's clear that the guarantor is part of the contract and the witnesses are signing it, how can you say you can still only collect from free and clear property? Well, we have a different source where in the Tosefta it says, Eidim achasumin al she'ela shalom beget, pasul. Chayshinan shem al she'ela shalom chasmu. So what's a she'ela shalom? They didn't have a lot of documents going back and forth from different places. So they wrote the get, and then after the get, they added a couple of lines telling the people to go say hello and bring my greetings to this person. And then the witnesses signed below that. So therefore, under those circumstances, the get is disqualified because we don't know what the witnesses signed on. They might have just signed on the greeting and not on the get. And Rabbi Yochanan explained to me, or the words of Rabbi Yochanan were explained to me, that if it says she'elo, give them greetings, then the get is disqualified. But if he says vishelo and give them greetings, then the get is kosher because it's clear they were signing on both. So therefore, if it says, and this person should be the guarantor, according to Rabbi Yochanan, there should be a lien on the guarantor's property. So it's a question on Rabbi Yochanan. Hachanami, the cost of ploni arev. So the Gemara says, no, when Rabbi Yochanan says you can only collect from the guarantor's free and clear property, that's where it says ploni arev, not ploni arev, not with the vav. So now the Gemara says, okay, well, there's no contradiction. Rabbi Yochanan, but I know the Rav. Now Rabbi Yochanan is in fact saying the exact same thing as Rav. So the Gemara says, Ema v'cheinam Rabbi Yochanan. Yeah, we have to say it. And so Rabbi Yochanan says, in agreement with Rav, Ma'isu ba'afnei Rabbi Yishmael. So there was an incident that came before Rabbi Yishmael, and this is the case that we had in our Mishnah, where there was a person, a lender was choking, I don't know, metaphorically or physically, choking the borrower in the marketplace, pressing him to pay. And the guarantor said, I'll cover it. So Rabbi Yishmael said, you can only collect from the free and clear property of the guarantor. And Ben Nana said, no, you can't even collect from that. the guarantor because he doesn't really intend. So Ibailo, and this is debate about whether a person is signed below the guarantor is signed below the witnesses. Can you collect from the free and clear or not from anything? Rabbi Shmuel says only from the free and clear. Benana says not from anything. So Ma'aseh Rabbi Shmuel, Amar Rabbi Baruch Hanan Rabbi Yochanan, Afa Pisha Kilis Rabbi Shmuel is bananas. Even though Rabbi Shmuel praises bananas at the end of the discussion, he says you have to study with bananas. Bananas is brilliant. His analysis still ain't halacha kamoso or halacha kamoso. The law is like Rabbi Shmuel, who says that under those circumstances, you can only collect from the free and clear of the guarantor and not from his nechas and mishabadim. So, but that was the Gemara was discussing there, where the guarantor signed below the witnesses. But Ibailo b'chanuk mali. What would Rabbi Shmuel say? Well, it's the halacha mali amar Rabbi Shmuel. In the case of chanuk, what would Rabbi Shmuel say? Literally, in the case where the borrower is being choked by the lender, and Rabbi Shmuel says, and the guarantor says, "I'll cover it." Still, there does Rabbi Shmuel say you could collect from his free and clear property, or do we say like bananas, you can't collect from anything? Gemara says, "Tashman Amar Rabbi Yaakov Amar Rabbi Yochanan Chol Kali Rabbi Shmuel Af B'Chanuk." Yeah, even there, Rabbi Shmuel would say that you can only collect from the free and clear property. Halacha kamoso, ain't halacha kamoso. Is the law like Rabbi Shmuel or not? Tashman Kiyasa Ravin Amar Rabbi Yochanan Chol Kali Rabbi Shmuel Af B'Chanuk Halacha kamoso Af B'Chanuk. Rabbi Shmuel, the law is like him, and he argues, and he says, if borrower is being choked, again, somebody guarantees you can collect, but only from its free and clear property. Whereas Banana says you can't collect from anything from the guarantor, and the law is like Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Chanuk v'kanu miyado mishtabed. Says, okay, even though the law is like Rabbi Shmuel, if the borrower is being choked, you can collect from the guarantor, from his liened property, but only from the free and clear. Let's say the guarantor says, stop, leave him alone, I'll guarantee it. And he says, well, let's do a kinyan. So the lender does a kinyan with the guarantor. Well, if he does a kinyan, then all of a sudden there's a lien on the property of the guarantor, because then we know he's serious. We call the Arav Ba'alma Lukabai kinyan. This teaches us that a guarantor in general does not require a kinyan. In general, only in this case that does the guarantor. In the case of Chanuk, does the guarantor require a kinyan? But in general, a guarantor does not require the kinyan. He could just say, I'll guarantee it. He doesn't even need to require a kinyan. Rav Nachman says, Arav the Beis Din who will buy a kinyan. If the guarantor goes in the front of the court, and we see he's serious, he's in front of a court, there we know he's serious, he doesn't require the kinyan. Haba'alma, but in general, by kinyan. But in general, we say a guy just says, I'll guarantee it, that's not enough, he has to have a kinyan. Be'ochasa, and the halacha is Arav b'shas matamos, the guarantor during the time of the loan will buy a kinyan, because if he sees the loan taking place and he says, I'll guarantee it, well then that's enough, it doesn't require a kinyan. But achar matamos, but if it's later on, by kinyan, because we don't have the guy speaking. He says, I'll guarantee the loan. The loan's already been lent out, so we have to know he's serious by doing the kinyan. Arav the Beis Din will buy kinyan, but if it's in the court, he does not. If he guarantees in front of the court, he does not require a kinyan. Because through the benefit that they believe him, he actually is serious and he agrees to have a lien on his property. So we're going to, God willing, make a siyum on this Masechta on Wednesday, December 25th at 3:30 p.m. Everybody's welcome. But I wanted to say one thing, that the Gemara ends with the concept of a guarantor. A lot of the Masechta is about who's right, partners fighting, and who loses money, who owes who. But at the end of the day, the Gemara decides to conclude by saying we all have the ability to be guarantors for the other. So we could be the guarantors. Okay, we're going to start now Masechet Sanhedrin. We'll do Haskalah on Sanhedrin because we always have to keep going.